it was my job to organise that event as part of my full-time period of union work. And beer was in short supply, so I organised to get Mudgee beer. Now, Mudgee beer was Mudgee beer in those days, and it went off very quickly. And they had all this Mudgee beer, and the event was cancelled. So I thought, what am I going to do with all this bloody beer? It'll go off, I can't send it back. So I had a pleasant problem. So when it come to the Sunday in Sydney, in which 30,000 people participated in the Peace March to end the carnival, I sent the word around that there was going to be a victory grog evening out at Malabar, where a couple of comrades had a house, but it was mainly sandhills. They had a house, and there might have been another comrade up the road who had a house. So I organised for the beer to be delivered there and for it to be made cold. So we filled up the bath with it, we filled up the coppers with it, we got 44-gallon drums, we put it in the sinks, we put it everywhere, all this cold beer. So we spread the word around at the march. Comrade, if you want to celebrate, go out to Bonnie Jago's place. So a stack of people turned up, ready for a piss night. So we were all out there, out in the sandhills, because there wasn't any room in the house. It was full up with beer and food and stuff. We sang every revolutionary song you can think of, the International, Christ knows what, and we really got pissed. I've thought about the Communist Party in the context of Australian society. It was part of Australian society. Its goal was to produce a better Australia. And therefore, it had strong grassroots activists. You had shop committees at railways, and the power industries and the other industries, where the communists were central to the leadership, but they worked with non-party people, with ALP people, with militants, etc. The influence of the party was much greater than its size. And people admired the communists because of the culture that they displayed. It was the quality of leadership, and it was the commitment that they made, and that inspired people. I reckon there was a lot of people who didn't support people like Jim Healey when he stood in the elections as their member for their certain area to be in federal parliament. But when it come to the union, they wanted Jim Healey because really the values of the Communist Party were the people's values, and therefore, when we're promoting our values in the union movement, people were saying, yes, that's what we want. We want a more just society. So I thought, if I had to sum up and say to people, what the hell have we did over the last 70 years? And I would say what we've tried to do with some success, but only some success, I think we have tried to produce a society which is more cohesive, that is more just, that provides equal opportunity, that provides greater equality, that we want a system of government that is based on participatory democracy, that we supported a multicultural Australia, we wanted a sustainable economy, and we wanted to lift the quality of life of working people. So I think that's what we fought for. I think we should not underestimate what we have achieved. I think we underestimated. But what we achieved was based on, some of the things we achieved were based on socialist values. So it's, now people can say we set out to make capitalism work. What we did set out to do was to create reforms in society based on socialist values. So when you put it in that context, some people said, because I was trying to do that, and along with a lot of other people, I was a reformist. I was a reformist. But when you were a leader in a workers' movement, a union, it is not the union belonging to the Communist Party.
That's right.
It's a union belonging to the workers. So the communists could use their experience to influence the union and help the union analyse what was happening in society, but it always had to be the union, the workers deciding, and you had to always do what was in the interest of workers, and that meant making capitalism work better. Well, that was your job. I'm a product of the party. It made me a better person. I would describe myself as a communist Marxist, mainly working in the trade union movement. That's why that is so is a long story. But what the Communist Party did for people like me, but for all party members, like it developed a collective view of the political developments taking place at the time. So we used to have party industrial committee meetings. So when I sat in a meeting from the building industry, and I had these other comrades from many other industries, and they were reporting on what were the big issues in the minds of the workers, etc., what was their concerns. I was getting a macro picture, whereas the building industry was only giving me a micro picture. So it gave me the big picture. And then we discussed how do we deal with some of these issues. So we discussed strategy and tactics and how to mobilise the movement. So it brought the collective wisdom of the party into helping leaders, individual leaders, because their individual leaders have got their limitations. You know, they work in particular areas. But to understand the class struggle, you needed the party. And I think the collective wisdom of the party was decisive, including its Marxist method of analysis. And that's what's missing today. Like, for example, if I ask people, what is the strategy of the ruling class of Australia today, I would get a dozen different answers. That would be, each of them would be partly right. But I don't know that they could crystallise it into something that workers could get their mind around. They're about deregulating the labour market. They're about disempowering workers. They're about using spin doctors to distort people's understanding of the truth and of the facts. The weakness of today is that we don't have such a party, but we still have people who have learnt off the elders of the past, who were largely party members, a lot about leadership, strategical thinking and planning, etc. So, and they also played a role of inspiring people. When I got inspired, I wanted to be one of them. The future for the Australian working class will be determined largely by the strength of the activist movement of the working class. So I would be saying to workers that it's not enough to campaign for a better enterprise agreement. If you only campaign for a better enterprise agreement, what you've gained only lasts for the life of that agreement. You have to realise that our enemies have a class strategy of the ruling class and explain to them what the essence of that strategy is. And I would say to them that their role is to not only recruit people into the union, but to develop their political consciousness. And you need to use history to do it. History is on our side. When I look at a lot of the arguments used by our enemies, they are arguments that have been used for 50, 70 bloody years. And we've demolished them, like the trickle-down theory. How do you deal with the trickle-down theory? We have to simplify our message. I deal with the trickle-down theory. I try to, in a simple way, saying, look, the trickle-down theory doesn't work in respect of the actions of the employing class. But the trickle-down theory works when the workers are powerful enough to force wealth down, like superannuation. And I try to show a comparison with their values, corporate values, with labour values by examples. Sally McManus does this very well. I would say, let's look at this in the sense of how the clash of values. Big business is concerned about, supports corporate values. Corporate values are about the self-interest of corporation and maximising their profits. That's what they're about. And you see it with super. They only wanted super for the elite. They want a good society for the elite, not for the class. We wanted super for everyone. There's the difference. They've always been about the elite. We've always been about the class. The employing class of Australia only supported reforms that benefit workers where it meant they were necessary for families to survive. They only supported other reforms that allowed workers to be able to be a productive force in the system of production, like certain level of education, etc. And they only supported their other needs, social needs, because they're human beings. But when it comes to, so they were about the survival of the working class in the system of capitalism. We are about enriching the quality of life of the Australian people. And we have succeeded in many respects. When we talk about the Accord, we can look at some of those achievements. So, and I would say, finally, that the issue of the future is going to be decided by power. If the working class doesn't maximise its power to its activist and militancy, and militant unionism is destroyed, we will lose the future. In just about every reform we seek, there is socialist values, equality, equal opportunity, etc., etc. And we ought to focus on the value side, because people are guided in their decisions by their values. But the challenge is that there are a lot of competing values. There are corporate values, full employment, for example, they put forward as one of their values. The end objective is their own self-interest. If they'll give workers a wage increase when the workers are strong enough to make it better, easier, cheaper for the employer to give the wage increase than to refuse the wage increase. So the workers have to use their power. If they don't use their power, they can't win the future.